He shouted so loudly the marble walls of Clarence House seemed to echo it back. "You lied to me all my life." The door slammed behind him, and for the first time in modern royal history, silence fell heavier than the crown itself. Cameras didn't catch the moment, but a staff member's trembling voice later whispered it to a journalist. The future King of England had screamed those words at his father, the reigning monarch of the United Kingdom. But what could possibly drive Prince William, the symbol of royal stability, to accuse his own father of deceit? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It all began with something as simple, as undeniable, and as devastating as DNA. 3 letters that hold the truth of generations. 3 letters that could undo centuries of royal lineage in a single test tube. A quiet scientific report, hidden deep within palace archives, surfaced unexpectedly. And when it did, it set off a chain reaction that no amount of royal protocol could contain. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the very foundation of a royal bloodline was proven false? If a single genetic code revealed that the future king didn't share his father's blood at all? That's not a rumor anymore. According to insiders, the palace has confirmed a DNA discovery that has shaken the monarchy to its core, and it's not about succession paperwork or family feuds this time. It's about biology, about truth. The discovery, sources say, came during a quiet verification process meant to preserve royal records for posterity. Every few decades, the Crown commissions confidential medical audits, from health screenings to genetic archiving. Routine in theory, secretive in practice. This time, something in the data didn't match. The lab flagged an anomaly. A royal aide panicked, and within 24 hours, Buckingham Palace went into silent lockdown mode. That's when everything changed for Prince William. In public, he carried on, the perfect heir, the devoted husband, the stoic statesman. But behind closed doors, those who know him say he grew distant, unsettled, almost haunted. Friends described him pacing long corridors late at night, rereading his mother's letters, questioning his entire identity. How do you look at the man who raised you, called father by the world, and wonder if the science says otherwise? How do you balance the love you felt as a child with the betrayal of an adult discovery? The palace's official silence only fueled speculation. A whispered conversation between 2 footmen was overheard by a royal correspondent. "They've confirmed something about the tests. That's all I'll say." Hours later, the reporter's article vanished from the news site. Then came the denials, carefully phrased. "The palace does not comment on private medical matters." Not a rejection, not even a correction, just a wall of polished words meant to bury the truth. But the truth had already started to crawl out from beneath the velvet curtains. Some say the chain of events began when an archivist digitizing Queen Elizabeth's private files stumbled upon a sealed envelope marked only with the initials DS, possibly standing for Diana Spencer. Inside, according to leaks, were pages of correspondence referencing a test conducted decades ago. A DNA test, one she supposedly ordered quietly, through a private physician, during a period when her marriage to Charles had begun to fracture. If that's true, it would mean Princess Diana herself had doubts. Doubts she never voiced publicly, but carried with her until her final days. Imagine the weight of that secret. To know something that could shatter the monarchy, yet protect it anyway, for the sake of your sons. Diana was always described as emotional, compassionate, but rarely as calculating. Yet maybe she calculated this. That truth delayed was better than truth denied. Perhaps she believed time would reveal what she could not say. And now, time finally has. What's eerie is how closely this moment mirrors history. In the early 2000s, rumors swirled about discrepancies in royal genealogical archives. Back then, the palace brushed them off as tabloid fiction. But insiders now claim those whispers came from earlier audits, the same ones that uncovered traces of genetic mismatches within certain archival records. Nothing concrete enough to prove anything until this year. Until new technology allowed them to cross-reference decades-old blood samples with unprecedented accuracy. And this time, the data didn't lie. When William reportedly confronted his father, it wasn't planned. It wasn't scheduled between official duties. It was emotional, raw, and immediate. According to one account, he'd been reviewing files personally, under the guise of heritage projects, when he stumbled upon restricted documents. The next hour, witnesses say, he stormed into Charles's private office, his face pale, his jaw clenched, papers in hand. No cameras, no press, just father and son, and an unbearable truth hanging between them. Can you imagine that silence? The sound of generations cracking? The prince who'd built his entire identity around duty now faced the possibility that his blood didn't belong to the crown at all. In the days that followed, palace staff described an air of paralysis. Meetings canceled. Security increased. Aides refusing to make eye contact. It wasn't just a scandal, it was an identity crisis. For the monarchy, lineage isn't merely tradition, it's legitimacy. Remove that, and everything collapses. The crown depends not only on faith, but on blood. And yet, what if that faith has been misplaced all along? For years, conspiracy theorists have toyed with the idea that Diana's relationships beyond Charles may have been deeper than publicly acknowledged. She had friends, confidants, and supporters outside the royal circle. Men who understood her loneliness better than her own husband. It's one thing to speculate. It's another to find scientific evidence pointing in that direction. That's why this discovery is so dangerous, because it moves from rumor to record, from gossip to genome. Still, the question remains, why now? Why would this DNA verification surface in 2025, decades after Diana's passing, and just as the monarchy tries to rebuild its image under Charles's reign? Some suggest timing wasn't coincidence at all, that someone inside wanted it known, that perhaps a long-buried truth finally had to breathe. Others whisper about a whistleblower within the palace labs, an employee who couldn't stomach the cover-up any longer. Whatever the reason, once Prince William learned the results, nothing was the same. Witnesses describe him disappearing from public view for 48 hours. His phone switched off, his schedule wiped. When he finally emerged, it was for a private family meeting, one that reportedly turned into a shouting match. It wasn't just anger, it was devastation. The kind that comes when every photograph, every childhood memory, suddenly looks like a lie. He wasn't just confronting Charles. He was confronting history. And that's the story the palace desperately wants to contain. They can manage scandals about finances, affairs, even politics. But not paternity, not the foundation stone of the monarchy itself. Because if Prince William's DNA doesn't match King Charles's, what does that mean for succession? For the legitimacy of the future king? For the image of Britain's perfect heir? Even now, journalists close to the royal beat describe extraordinary levels of censorship. Stories vanish mid-publication. Interviews cut short. A royal correspondent who hinted at lineage inconsistencies on live television was pulled from the broadcast before the next segment aired. One BBC producer was reportedly reassigned after pressing palace representatives for comment. The message is clear. This story must not spread. But it's too late. Because truth, once uncovered, spreads like fire through dry grass. It burns slow at first, then uncontrollably. And there's another layer. Sources hint the DNA report doesn't just cast doubt on William's paternity, it references a name. A man once close to Diana. Someone long suspected but never confirmed. Someone the palace went to great lengths to erase from official photographs. If that name reaches the public, it won't just destroy Charles's credibility. It could redefine the monarchy's bloodline forever. Can you imagine the chaos if it's proven that the future king isn't biologically royal? That the House of Windsor, for all its ceremony and protocol, has been living a generational illusion? This isn't just gossip anymore. This is documentation. Science. Proof. And it's why insiders say Charles's private office has gone into emergency mode. Holding late-night strategy sessions, drafting legal notices, even considering a temporary retreat from public appearances. Because how do you protect a throne built on blood when the blood itself is questioned? But there's another, quieter tragedy here, the human one. Behind the monarchy's grandeur stands a son in anguish, torn between two fathers, the one who raised him and the one whose DNA might truly define him. And somewhere, in the echoes of history, Diana's voice seems to whisper again, warning that truth buried will always rise. In moments like this, royal titles mean nothing. Family does. Pain does. And perhaps for the first time in his life, Prince William isn't thinking like a future king. He's thinking like a son betrayed by the story he was told to believe. Imagine him standing before the mirror in one of the palace's grand chambers, looking at his reflection, wondering whose eyes stare back, wondering if the man in the mirror is even a Windsor at all. The irony? The same institution that once obsessed over blood purity may now fall because of it. The crown, so desperate to preserve its lineage, might lose it through the very science it trusted to protect it. And somewhere in those locked royal vaults, amid sealed envelopes and forgotten test results, lies a truth that could either destroy or redeem them all. But this is just the beginning. Because the leak that started it all wasn't random. The person who uncovered those files knew exactly where to look. And they weren't working alone. They wanted the truth to surface. They wanted Prince William to see what the world was never meant to know. And when he did, the heir to the throne screamed those words no palace wall could silence. "You're not my father." But what he discovered next, hidden behind that sealed royal document, would make that scream look like a whisper compared to what came after. It began quietly, as all great scandals do, not with a bang, but with a whisper. An anonymous email. A single attachment. A message sent from an encrypted server that bounced across continents before landing in the inbox of the Buckingham Palace communications director at 2:13 a.m. London time. The subject line read only 3 words. Check the vault. No name, no signature. Just a file titled sovereign_record.pdf. At first, they thought it was spam. The royal family receives hundreds of strange emails a day. Hoaxes, conspiracy theories, threats. But this one was different. The file came from an internal domain, one that could only be generated by someone inside the system. Someone with access to restricted databases. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The moment the communications director clicked the file, everything changed. The screen flickered, the document loaded, and there it was, 2 DNA sample IDs. One labeled Subject C. Windsor, the other Subject W. Windsor. And at the bottom, in small red text, the line that would haunt everyone who saw it. No genetic match confirmed between paternal subjects. No match. The phrase exploded through the palace like an electrical surge. Within minutes, encrypted phone calls were being made, secure servers were being shut down, and security teams were dispatched to trace the leak. The monarchy's greatest fear wasn't the discovery itself, it was exposure. For centuries, the British crown had survived wars, divorces, abdications, and scandals. But DNA? That was irrefutable. That was science. By sunrise, a crisis meeting had been called. Senior advisors gathered in a windowless conference room beneath Buckingham Palace, their phones confiscated at the door. The head of royal security presented a grim report. The file had been accessed from a restricted internal archive and sent through a backdoor connection. Whoever sent it had full clearance. A mole inside the system. One aide, pale and sweating, whispered, "Does His Majesty know?" The room fell silent. King Charles was informed hours later. He was reportedly in his private study, reviewing documents for an upcoming state visit, when his private secretary entered with the encrypted tablet. Charles read the report, blinked twice, and muttered, "Impossible." Then he read it again, and then, without a word, he stood up, walked to the window, and closed the curtains. Meanwhile, the staff on the ground floor began noticing strange movements. Guards stationed near the royal archives were doubled. Certain corridors, usually open, were suddenly restricted. And then came the deletion orders. Whole data servers were wiped clean. Backup drives were physically removed and destroyed. Something big had happened, but the higher-ups refused to explain. Have you ever felt that sensation when everyone around you knows something, but no one will say it out loud? That's what the palace felt like in those hours. Silence louder than speech. The kind of silence that means truth is being buried alive. But one person inside refused to stay silent. The whistleblower, still anonymous to this day, had a plan. They didn't just send one email. They sent 3. The first to Buckingham Palace. The second to a British journalist known for her coverage of royal health stories. And the third to Prince William's private aide. That third email would change everything. By the time the message reached Kensington Palace, the royal press office was already scrambling to contain the first leak. But William's aide, a trusted confidant since his days at Eton, recognized the file structure immediately. He'd seen something similar months before, referenced in a confidential project codenamed Sovereign Lineage Audit, a project the king himself had commissioned. If this was connected, it meant the leak wasn't fake. It was real. He didn't tell William right away. Not yet. He printed the file, sealed it in an envelope, and tucked it into a secure drawer. But by the next morning, rumors had begun to swirl within the household staff. Someone had overheard the word DNA. Someone else mentioned lab samples. By noon, a tabloid reporter tweeted cryptically, "Big news coming from Buckingham. Think bloodlines." The tweet vanished 10 minutes later, but the damage was done. By mid-afternoon, reporters were stationed outside palace gates. Every news outlet wanted a statement. None came. Inside, William sensed something was off. He'd been scheduled for a public appearance, a mental health initiative visit, but the itinerary changed abruptly. His advisors looked nervous. His father wasn't taking calls. And when he finally cornered his private secretary, the man avoided his eyes. "There's something you need to see, sir," he said quietly. "But it's delicate." That evening, as rain lashed against the palace windows, the envelope was placed in front of him. He hesitated before opening it. Inside were the printouts, DNA markers, identification codes, the damning phrase in red at the bottom. "No genetic match confirmed." He didn't speak for nearly a minute. His eyes scanned the page again and again. Then he whispered, "Is this a joke?" "It's from the archives, sir," his aide replied. "Verified chain of custody." William stood, his chair scraping across the marble. "Where's my father?" But Charles was already in crisis meetings. Senior courtiers were drafting non-disclosure orders. Lawyers were drawing up confidentiality extensions. Behind the walls, the monarchy was bracing for the storm it had long feared, the one that no PR team could fix. Still, the question no one could answer was this: who sent the email? The palace's cybersecurity team traced it to an internal IP address linked to a workstation in the royal archives. But when investigators arrived, the computer had been wiped clean. The employee assigned to that terminal, a mid-level archivist named Jonathan Reeves, had vanished. His badge was found in the staff parking lot. His flat in Chelsea was empty. And here's where it gets stranger. Reeves wasn't just any archivist. He'd worked for the palace for 12 years and had previously assisted with projects involving the Queen's personal documents. He knew about the classified vault beneath the palace, a vault said to contain sealed medical and genealogical records of every royal family member since the early 1900s. Few were ever allowed inside. Reeves was one of them. So why disappear? Why risk everything to send those files? Because, as later sources claimed, Reeves wasn't acting alone. He was reportedly in contact with a journalist, a woman known for investigating royal scandals with surgical precision. The same journalist who received that second email. The two had been corresponding for months, piecing together inconsistencies in royal archives. The journalist had been warned off the story repeatedly, but when Reeves found the test results, he decided to act. And that's how the leak began. Not with hackers or foreign agents, but with a palace insider driven by conscience. The press never got hold of the full file, though. Not yet. The palace's damage control machine worked overtime. Legal teams issued injunctions faster than the tabloids could type. But the smell of scandal was already in the air. TV pundits started asking subtle questions. Why had Prince William canceled public events so suddenly? Why was King Charles seen leaving a late-night emergency meeting? Why had the BBC quietly pulled a scheduled documentary segment titled The Royal Bloodline? Fact or fiction? Coincidence? Maybe. But coincidences don't cluster like that around the same week. And here's the kicker. That very weekend, the palace's internal IT team discovered a backup copy of the deleted file hidden in an obscure system folder. Someone had tried to erase it, but failed. And on that backup, metadata showed something chilling. The document had been opened multiple times before the leak by senior palace staff. Some of the access logs even matched devices linked to royal advisors, meaning the king's inner circle knew about the DNA results long before the leak. They'd sat on it. Imagine the betrayal, inside and out. To the world, it looked like stability. But behind those gates, trust was collapsing brick by brick. And William? He wasn't supposed to see the file at all. The advisors wanted to handle it internally, hoping the evidence could be suppressed, rewritten, or discredited before he ever found out. But fate, or perhaps someone's conscience, intervened. Within 24 hours of reading the report, William requested a private audience with his father. It wasn't granted. Charles claimed scheduling conflicts. For 2 days, the heir to the throne was ignored. Then came the confrontation we heard about at the end of the introduction. the one that ended with shouts echoing through Clarence House. Now here's the part the world hasn't heard yet. After that confrontation, palace CCTV footage shows William leaving the residence carrying a brown envelope, the same size and shape as the one containing the DNA documents. He wasn't headed home. He was headed to a private investigator, one who specializes in verifying genetic data independently. Why? Because William wanted to see for himself if the truth matched the file. Think about that for a second. The future King of England secretly hiring his own investigator to verify whether his father is really his father. That's not just scandalous, it's tragic. And this is where the story starts to spiral. The investigator, whose name hasn't been released publicly, later confirmed that William's request involved a matter of familial verification and required discrete genetic confirmation. The lab results from that private test have never been published, but palace insiders insist they match the original leak perfectly. If that's true, then both tests, the archived one and the new one, said the same thing. No match. And now you might be wondering, what did the king do next? Did he deny it? Did he confess? Did he threaten to destroy the evidence? Sources close to the matter claim Charles went into immediate defense mode. Legal barriers, gag orders, and an all-out hunt for the whistleblower. But beneath that frenzy, one chilling truth remained. The leak had exposed something that could not be unlearned. Not by William. Not by anyone who saw those results. And it was only a matter of time before someone else outside the palace saw them too. Because Jonathan Reeves, the missing archivist, had one last move planned before he vanished. He'd made a copy of everything, and he'd hidden it somewhere no one would think to look, somewhere only one person could find it. Princess Diana's personal archive. But what was inside that archive? Why would Reeves choose that specific place? And what did it have to do with Diana's own suspicions about her son's lineage? That answer, when uncovered, would drag the royal family deeper into scandal than anyone thought possible. Because the next revelation wasn't about Charles. It was about Diana, and what she might have known all along. It's strange how quickly perfection can crumble. One day, Prince William was the steady heartbeat of the monarchy, the reliable heir, the picture of family devotion, the quiet force holding a fractured royal image together. The next, he was a man haunted by a few lines of text printed on a piece of paper. No genetic match confirmed. It played in his mind like a curse. Over and over. For years, the public saw him as unshakable. A man who'd endured the worst, the death of his mother, the relentless press, the endless scrutiny, and come out graceful. But inside Kensington Palace, something had shifted. The staff said his eyes looked different. Distant. He'd walk through the corridors, but seemed somewhere else entirely, lost in thought, trapped between disbelief and dread. Have you ever had a moment where your entire reality turns upside down? Where something you believed your whole life, something so foundational, suddenly feels like a lie? That's where William was. The future King of England, now questioning if the blood in his veins was even royal at all. The day after the confrontation with Charles, the palace was tense. Nobody dared to speak above a whisper. William had left Clarence House abruptly, his car speeding out through the gates with headlights cutting through the fog. He didn't go home. He drove, for hours, down through empty roads until he reached the countryside outside Berkshire, near one of Diana's old charity sites. That's where he sat, alone in his car, replaying every memory that now carried a new meaning. He thought of Diana's smile when she'd tell him he was destined for something greater. Of Charles's occasional coldness, the subtle distance even as a child. He remembered how his mother used to tell him, "Never let anyone else define you, darling. Not even your father." At the time, he'd laughed. But now, those words echoed like prophecy. Somewhere between guilt and rage, another emotion began to surface: betrayal. Not just at Charles, but at everyone who'd kept this hidden. Advisors, doctors, the entire palace machine. If this DNA revelation was true, and both tests now confirmed it, then how long had the truth been buried? How many people had lied to protect the image of a family built on ceremony and silence? He clenched the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Meanwhile, back at Buckingham, Charles was spiraling too, but in a different way. The king wasn't angry at William's reaction. He was terrified of it. He knew once William started asking questions, he wouldn't stop. And if William went public, the monarchy wouldn't survive. Not with Parliament already uneasy about the crown's future. Not with the world so eager to see royal walls fall. Inside the palace war room, damage control was underway. Advisors debated everything from medical privacy laws to strategic denial. Some wanted to release a vague statement framing the DNA discovery as a technical inconsistency. Others demanded total silence. But one voice, an older counselor who'd served under the late Queen, warned them, "He's not just your heir anymore. He's a father, and a father will chase truth harder than a prince ever could." That was the problem. William's instincts weren't political. They were personal. Later that night, he returned to Kensington Palace and went straight to his study. His wife, Catherine, was waiting. She'd seen the change in him long before he said a word. He closed the door behind him and handed her the envelope. "You need to see this." She read the document slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "This can't be real," she whispered. "It's real," he said. His voice cracked on the word. The room fell silent. Catherine, ever composed, reached for his hand, but he pulled away. Not out of anger, but from something deeper. Shock. Vulnerability. The kind that makes touch feel unbearable. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked. "I don't know," he said, "but I can't pretend anymore." He sat down, his head in his hands, and for the first time in his adult life, the weight of being a royal didn't feel like a crown. It felt like chains. As dawn broke over London, William made a decision that would set off a ripple effect through the royal family. He wanted answers, real ones, not filtered through palace lawyers or royal spin doctors. He wanted the truth straight from the source, from the people who handled those DNA samples. By mid-morning, he was at the private lab that had conducted the independent test. It was located discreetly in Surrey, behind a high-security gate under the name of a generic research company. The lead geneticist, Dr. Evelyn Carter, greeted him nervously. She'd been warned not to disclose anything to royal clients without authorization, but William wasn't asking as a royal. He was asking as a son. "I don't want protocol," he told her. "I want honesty." Dr. Carter hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Your Highness, the data we analyzed showed a discrepancy in paternal markers. We ran it twice to be certain. It wasn't an error." William swallowed hard. "You're saying my father." "I'm saying the genetic indicators do not align with His Majesty's profile," she said, carefully choosing her words. "Scientifically, that means he is not your biological parent." He closed his eyes. The sentence landed like a dagger. Not because it confirmed what he feared, but because hearing it out loud made it real. When he finally drove back to London, the city felt different. Colder. The palace towers didn't look majestic anymore. They looked like walls built to trap him in a lie. The royal press office, meanwhile, was in chaos. Whispers of DNA scandal had reached foreign tabloids. An editor from France was preparing to run a story titled "The Windsor Blood Mystery," and palace lawyers were threatening lawsuits to prevent publication. But the real panic came from within, because someone in the palace, maybe even someone close to Charles, had leaked fragments of the truth to the European press. It wasn't just one leak. It was a pattern. Files were surfacing, each pointing back to the same hidden project from years ago, Project Sovereign Lineage. That name appeared again and again in confidential memos, dating back to the early 1990s. The timing aligned with Diana's growing disillusionment and rumors of palace surveillance around her. It seemed she wasn't paranoid after all. The monarchy really had been monitoring her, and possibly conducting tests without her full consent. William began connecting the dots. The timing of those documents. The archived blood samples. The sealed reports marked "for eyes only." Every line pointed to a single truth. Someone in the 1990s knew this DNA issue existed and chose to bury it. And when he realized that, something inside him hardened. He wasn't just a son anymore. He was an investigator. A man determined to uncover who had orchestrated the lie and why. He began questioning everyone. Old advisors, former staff, even one of Diana's surviving friends, who'd remained silent for years. She told him something that chilled him. "Your mother once said she feared the truth about you would never be allowed to come out. That too many people depended on the illusion." "What truth?" he asked. The friend hesitated. "I think she meant this." That night, William sat in Diana's old study, a room rarely entered since her passing. On the desk was a small wooden box containing keepsakes, handwritten notes, photos, and clippings from her causes. Underneath the letters, he found something unexpected, a sealed envelope with his name written in her handwriting. It was dated August 1997. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a short note. "If you're reading this, it means the world finally knows. I loved you because you are mine, not because of where you come from. Remember that, whatever they tell you." He felt his chest tighten. She knew. Somehow she knew. The clock on the wall ticked loudly as he folded the letter back into its envelope. For the first time, his anger shifted, from rage at his father to sorrow for his mother. She'd carried this secret alone, choosing silence over scandal, protecting him even from the truth. He whispered, "You tried to warn me, didn't you?" Outside, the palace lights shimmered over the Thames, but inside that room, it felt like the world had stopped. Meanwhile, across London, another revelation was about to erupt. The missing archivist, Jonathan Reeves, had resurfaced, but not in Britain. Reports placed him in Lisbon, Portugal, where he'd allegedly met with a journalist carrying a hard drive labeled Royal Vault. That meeting would ignite the next wave of chaos. Because what Reeves had wasn't just DNA files. It was something bigger. Something even the king didn't know existed. It contained evidence linking the royal genetic files to a secret project conducted decades earlier, one that Diana herself might have been part of. And when William learned what that project was called, he realized his nightmare had only begun. It sat there in the dark, deep beneath Buckingham Palace, a steel cabinet no one was supposed to open. The air around it smelled of dust, history, and secrets too heavy to carry. Inside that cabinet was a folder stamped with 3 words in faded ink: Project Sovereign Lineage. Few people knew it existed. Fewer still dared to touch it. But when Jonathan Reeves vanished from London and resurfaced in Lisbon, that file was already gone from the vault. He had taken it, and in doing so, he had stolen the monarchy's most guarded truth. What was in it? Why was it created? And why, decades later, was it still capable of tearing the royal family apart? The answer began long before William's discovery. Back in the mid-1990s, when Diana was alive and deeply uneasy. Mini-hook. What if Diana's instincts weren't paranoia, but prophecy? What if she had uncovered something so dangerous, so personal, that the palace built an entire operation just to contain it? After her separation from Charles, the royal household faced a growing problem. Rumors of extramarital relationships, questions about Harry's paternity, and whispers of Diana's close friendships with men outside the royal circle. The monarchy feared scandal, not just moral, but biological. If there was even a shadow of doubt over royal bloodlines, it could threaten the crown itself. That was when Project Sovereign Lineage was born, a covert initiative sanctioned by the late Queen's private secretary, meant to ensure unbroken legitimacy of succession through verified biological continuity. Translation: DNA testing. Quiet, discreet, and off the record. Royal doctors were tasked with collecting samples, blood, hair, tissue, under medical pretenses. Tests were done not just for health, but for confirmation. Some records were destroyed immediately, others sealed. And the results? Only 3 people ever saw them: the Queen, her physician, and her private secretary. Until Reeves found them. Now, fast forward nearly 3 decades. When Reeves accessed those digital archives, he noticed something strange. The project's digital log ended abruptly in late 1997, the very month Diana died. No closure, no final report. Just a blank space where her final file should have been. He suspected it was deleted deliberately. But computers don't forget. Buried in system backups, he found fragments of a document labeled Subject D, Secondary Verification. And within those fragments, a shocking line of text: Subject D requests independent confirmation outside royal chain of custody. Diana had known. She had ordered her own DNA test, and someone made sure the results disappeared. Think about that. A princess, the most photographed woman on earth, secretly trying to verify something the palace had hidden from her. What kind of truth was she chasing? Reeves couldn't stop digging. He reconstructed the deleted files using recovery software, piece by piece. It took months. But what emerged was terrifyingly clear. Diana had been corresponding with an outside geneticist, one who'd later died in what was ruled an accidental car crash. The date of that crash? 3 weeks before Diana's own. Coincidence or cleanup? When Reeves realized what he was holding, he panicked. This wasn't a conspiracy theory anymore. This was institutional deception written in lab reports and medical signatures. He copied everything to an encrypted drive, then vanished. Meanwhile, William had no idea this file existed. Not yet. He only knew that the DNA results didn't add up, that his father's blood didn't match his own. But Reeves's discovery would give him more than confirmation. It would give him context, motive, names. Because buried inside Project Sovereign Lineage was another file, labeled D2A. That file contained correspondence between palace officials discussing secondary paternal anomalies in relation to heir apparent, Subject W. One line stood out above the rest. Due to sensitive nature of results, subject disclosure deemed non-essential. Recommend destruction of record upon confirmation of succession security. Destruction of record. In other words, cover it up. Someone had buried the truth before William could even speak his first words. Reeves's Lisbon contact, the journalist, eventually revealed what she'd seen before Reeves disappeared again. She described the file as half science, half tragedy. Tables of genetic data, memos between royal doctors, and a handwritten note signed only E. Scholars later speculated that E stood for Elizabeth. Imagine the gravity of that. The late Queen possibly acknowledging, even authorizing, the concealment of biological truths to preserve royal continuity. And then imagine William reading those pages today. The prince raised to believe in honor, loyalty, and truth, now faced with proof that his entire identity had been managed like a public relations project. He wasn't just deceived. He was designed. This realization began to eat away at him. Every childhood moment replayed differently now. Every Christmas at Sandringham, every father-son photograph, every forced smile at public events, they all looked staged. He wondered, did his grandmother look at him differently because she knew? Did his father ever hesitate, even once, when calling him my son? One night, he confided in Catherine again. If this is true, everything changes, he said quietly. Everything I was meant to become, every oath I've taken, it's all built on a lie. She tried to calm him. But how do you comfort a man watching his own identity dissolve? While he wrestled with that, palace aides were scrambling to find Reeves. The intelligence division of the Royal Security Detail began an international search. They traced digital footprints, flight records, even hotel check-ins. Reeves was always one step ahead, until he wasn't. A week later, his rental car was found abandoned near the cliffs of Cabo de Roca in Portugal. Inside were traces of blood and a torn page from Project Sovereign Lineage. The Portuguese police labeled it a probable suicide, but investigators never found a body, which raised the chilling possibility. Did Reeves kill himself, or was he silenced? Either way, his disappearance didn't stop the storm. Before vanishing, he'd scheduled an automatic upload of the recovered documents to multiple journalists worldwide. Most ignored it, fearing legal retaliation. But one packet found its way to a small investigative outlet in Norway, and they published excerpts. For the first time in modern history, the existence of Project Sovereign Lineage was public. The monarchy's response was immediate. No such project has ever existed. But within hours, copies of the documents flooded the internet. The seals, the signatures, the palace letterheads, all authentic. William saw the reports before the palace could brief him. He didn't speak. He simply closed his laptop and left the room. When he finally returned to Clarence's house, he wasn't looking for confrontation this time. He was looking for truth. He told the king's private secretary, "I want access to the vault." The man hesitated. "That's impossible, sir. It's restricted." William's voice hardened. Then unrestricted. The next morning, under guard, he entered the same archive room Reeves had once worked in. Rows of locked drawers, decades of classified files. When he reached the steel cabinet, his breath caught. There it was, the missing label burned into metal, Project Sovereign Lineage. He pulled it open. The file inside wasn't complete. Pages had been torn, redacted, removed. But enough remained. Enough to prove the story wasn't a rumor. One memo, dated 1996, read, "Subject D expresses grave concern about inconsistencies. Requests secondary sample collection to confirm parentage of Subject W. Compliance pending royal authorization." Grave concern. Secondary sample. That could only mean one thing. Diana had her suspicions before anyone else. And just below that memo, a sticky note in handwriting unfamiliar to William. It read, "Her request denied. Proceed with containment." Containment. That word hit harder than any scientific data ever could, because it meant this wasn't accidental. This was deliberate. The system wasn't protecting truth, it was protecting itself. Standing there, William realized his mother had fought for him even in silence. And the same machine that claimed to honor her memory had been the one that buried her truth. He walked out of the archive room with a copy of the memo in his pocket. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring out at the lights of London, hearing his mother's voice again in his mind. "Never let them make you doubt who you are," he whispered to the empty room. "I won't." But outside those palace walls, another storm was brewing. The partial files Reeves leaked had reached the global press, and now major outlets were preparing to publish. For the first time in centuries, the legitimacy of the British heir was an open question. Parliament demanded answers. The Church of England, tied to the monarchy, called for clarification on succession integrity. And as the world turned its eyes toward Buckingham, William knew there was only one person left who could tell him the full truth. The one who had lived it. His grandmother. But when he reached out for answers, he discovered something chilling in her private papers, something that had been waiting for him all along. It was late evening when William arrived at Windsor Castle. The sky outside was bruised with clouds, and the weight of centuries pressed down on the stone walls. The castle had always been a place of comfort to him, a refuge filled with memories of his grandmother's laughter, the clink of teacups, the smell of polished wood. But that night it felt cold, hollow, like it was holding its breath. He wasn't there for nostalgia. He was there for answers. The Queen's private papers were said to be stored in a small chamber behind her personal library, an archive so secret that even senior advisors couldn't enter without permission. After her passing, the room had been sealed, its contents catalogued but never disclosed. But William now had special clearance. He walked past portraits of monarchs long gone, their painted eyes following him like silent witnesses. He paused at the heavy wooden door. His hand trembled as he turned the key. Inside, the air was still, thick with the scent of old parchment. Rows of files, letters, and red leather journals lined the shelves. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he knew what he hoped to find. Truth. A reason. A trace of remorse. Something that explained why his grandmother, the woman who preached duty above all, had allowed a lie this colossal to endure. The first few folders were mundane, state correspondence, Commonwealth notes, letters to foreign leaders. Then he found one labeled Private Reflections, 1996 to 1997. The handwriting on the cover was unmistakably hers, elegant, sharp, deliberate. He hesitated, then opened it. The first page was a diary entry. "There are matters of lineage that cannot be spoken of. The preservation of the institution must always outweigh personal pain. It is my greatest burden to bear." He froze. Those words, matters of lineage. It was confirmation she knew. As he turned the pages, a clearer picture began to form. She had learned about the DNA discrepancy during the late 1990s, after Diana's separation from Charles. Royal physicians had delivered the findings to her personally. The Queen, always composed, didn't react publicly. But in her private writings, her fear bled through. "The discovery presents grave implications," one note read. "The succession, if revealed, would destabilize the monarchy. The truth must be protected at all costs." All costs. It wasn't just an abstract phrase. It was an order. She had authorized the suppression of the test results. She had allowed files to be destroyed, evidence to vanish, and people, like Reeves decades later, to be silenced. He leaned back against the desk, staring at the journal in disbelief. How could she? The woman who taught him integrity, who told him that honesty was the cornerstone of leadership, had hidden the truth that defined his life. He read further. Another line caught his eye. "Diana is restless. She senses what has been concealed. I fear she may take matters into her own hands." So she'd known about Diana's suspicions too. Another page, written in early 1997. If she pursues verification independently, the results could prove catastrophic. Measures must be taken to prevent public disclosure. Measures. He closed the book, his pulse racing. Was she talking about public relations measures, or something darker? He sat there for a long time, surrounded by silence and ghosts. The ticking of an antique clock was the only sound. He imagined her there, sitting at that very desk, pen in hand, choosing monarchy over family, choosing legacy over love. Can you imagine realizing that the grandmother you adored had been the architect of your greatest heartbreak? That the woman whose hand rested on your shoulder in every photograph was also the one who'd quietly decided you could never know the truth? It broke something inside him. Still, amid the sorrow, one entry stood out. It was dated just weeks before her death. There will come a day when the truth cannot be hidden. When it does, I pray he understands I acted not out of malice, but out of duty. Duty. That word had guided her life, and now it haunted his. He felt the weight of those pages pressing against his chest as he closed the journal. He wanted to be angry at her, but he couldn't. She was gone, and somewhere in her final words, he sensed a flicker of guilt, a quiet confession wrapped in royal restraint. As he stood to leave, something caught his eye, a small, sealed envelope tucked behind the journal. The handwriting on it wasn't hers. It was his mother's. The envelope was addressed to Her Majesty, private. No date, no markings, just Diana's unmistakable looping script. His heart pounded. With trembling fingers, he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A letter. I know you know, it began. And I know why you've kept it. But I beg you, don't let him grow up believing a lie. He deserves to know where he comes from, even if the truth breaks us all. William felt his knees weaken. He sank into the chair, clutching the letter as though it might vanish. Diana had confronted the Queen directly. She hadn't been guessing. She'd known. At the bottom of the page, Diana had written one final line that would echo in William's mind for days to come. If anything happens to me, remember this was never about scandal. It was about freedom. Freedom. That was the word that defined Diana's life. And now, it was the word haunting her son's. William sat in that chair until dawn. He didn't cry. He just stared out at the first light spilling through the castle windows, realizing the monarchy he'd been born to protect had been built on a foundation of lies, and those lies had consumed everyone he loved. By morning, he made a decision. He wasn't going to hide anymore. He wasn't going to play the part of dutiful heir while secrets rotted beneath his feet. If his mother had fought for truth, he would finish what she started. But as he left Windsor Castle, a security officer approached him quietly. Your Royal Highness, the man said, a courier arrived for you earlier. It's marked urgent. No return address. William frowned. Where is it? The officer handed him a small brown package. Inside was a flash drive and a note that read simply, for your eyes only. The rest of Project Sovereign Lineage. No signature. No explanation. He looked up sharply, scanning the courtyard. Whoever sent it was gone. Back in his car, he stared at the drive in his palm. Was this the final piece of the puzzle? Or another trap? He hesitated, then whispered to himself. If I stop now, she'll never forgive me. He plugged it into his laptop. The screen flickered. Then a folder appeared, dated years earlier, during the Queen's reign. Files opened automatically, revealing encrypted reports, genetic charts, and voice memos. One file caught his eye. Confidential. Interview_Elizabeth_1998. He clicked play. A faint hiss of static. Then the unmistakable voice of his grandmother, calm, steady, carrying that tone of royal composure that had once comforted the entire nation. I have done what was necessary, she said. If truth is to destroy the crown, then I shall bear that sin myself. The people must never know. The recording ended abruptly. William sat frozen. It was confirmation beyond denial. The Queen herself had sealed the deception, fully aware of its cost. But the drive contained more. A subfolder labeled D-Truth. Inside, another voice memo. This one newer, dated just months before her death. He hesitated, then pressed play. A weary sigh. If William ever hears this, the Queen's voice said, softer now. Tell him the truth was never his enemy. Only fear was. I loved him as my grandson, whatever the blood may say. The file cut off mid-sentence. His throat tightened. Whatever resentment he felt dissolved into something more complex, sorrow, understanding, and the crushing weight of responsibility. He whispered to himself, you knew, but you still loved me. But there was no peace in that revelation, because hidden in that same folder was one more document, titled Contingency File, D. Its contents would prove that the Queen hadn't just known the truth. She'd prepared for the day it would come out. And what that file revealed would drag the late monarch's legacy, Diana's death, and the entire royal institution into a web of secrecy darker than anyone could have imagined. What if the truth Diana carried to her grave wasn't just emotional? It was scientific. What if the secret she died protecting wasn't about love, but blood? That question lingered in William's mind like a whisper that wouldn't fade. He'd uncovered evidence of her suspicions, read her pleas to the Queen, and even heard his grandmother's confession. But there was something missing, a final link connecting everything together. And now, staring at the folder labeled Contingency File D, he knew this was it. He opened the document. It wasn't one file, it was a collection. Scanned letters, old photos, phone logs, and a memo signed by the Queen's private secretary in 1997. The first page was titled Personal Affairs, Princess of Wales. The memo read, Her Royal Highness continues to pursue private investigations regarding paternity verification. Independent samples reportedly obtained through non-sanctioned sources. Intervention recommended before press involvement. Independent samples. Diana had been testing DNA behind palace backs. He scrolled further and found receipts, medical consultations, anonymous lab transactions, notes written in shorthand. The handwriting was hers. In one margin, she'd scribbled, Truth will set him free. The deeper he read, the clearer it became. Diana had collected hair strands and blood samples, not just from her sons, but from others too. Some marked with initials he didn't recognize. M, J, H. She wasn't guessing. She was comparing, cross-checking, searching for a pattern. Had she already known that one of her sons might not share the king's DNA? The documents suggested she had reason to suspect it. One letter addressed to a confidant read, They've tested him once already. I was not informed until after. I feel watched. I can't trust their doctors. I will do this quietly, through my own means. That confidant's name was blacked out, but in another file it appeared again, an address in France, connected to an investigative journalist Diana had worked with before her death. That journalist, according to the Queen's private notes, had been under surveillance observation shortly before the fatal car crash in Paris. Coincidence? Or pattern? William felt the blood drain from his face. He leaned closer to the screen, his eyes catching on a small handwritten note attached to one of the recovered scans. Evelyn confirmed it. I knew. Evelyn. That name appeared again. He searched through the folder and found a file titled Dr. Evelyn Carter, Correspondence. It was dated 1997. The same Evelyn Carter who decades later had told William to his face. It wasn't an error. She'd known his mother. He opened the letter. The words were gentle, almost mournful. Your Highness, I've completed the private verification. Results confirm significant anomalies in the sample comparison. I urge discretion, for safety and for your children. Significant anomalies. Diana must have received this letter only weeks before her death. He sat back, the air in the room suddenly feeling too thin to breathe. His mother hadn't been imagining things. She'd found out the truth, and the palace knew she had. That changed everything. For years, tabloids painted her as unstable, paranoid, dramatic. But what if she'd simply been right? What if the so-called emotional breakdowns were her reacting to the unbearable truth that her eldest son might not be Charles's by blood? And what if her death, long believed to be a tragic accident, had threads leading back to those discoveries? William shook his head, fighting the thought. He didn't want to believe it. He couldn't. But the documents in front of him suggested a level of surveillance that went beyond obsession. It was control. Every phone call logged, every meeting recorded, every trip monitored. There was even a file titled Operation Calm, a palace plan to stabilize public perception of the princess. It listed interventions, including controlled media leaks, social isolation, and health narrative management. They had gaslit her into silence. One of the final pages stopped him cold. It was a transcript of a phone call between the Queen's private office and a senior advisor at Clarence House, dated August 25, 1997, 5 days before Diana's fatal crash. Advisor, Her Highness has been in Paris. Reports indicate continued communication with the journalist. Do we intervene? Private Secretary, her behavior remains erratic. Let it pass quietly. No public acknowledgement. Advisor, She's spoken of taking the children abroad. Private secretary. If she does, measures must be reconsidered. Measures. The same word that appeared in the Queen's diary. The same word that haunted every document in this story. He closed his eyes, the world spinning. He remembered being 15, standing beside his mother's coffin, shaking hands with mourners while cameras flashed. He'd always been told it was an accident. But what if? He pushed the thought away, gripping the edge of the desk. Don't do this to yourself, he muttered. Don't go there. But the more he resisted, the louder the question became. What if Diana hadn't just been hunted by the press, but by her own institution? He needed confirmation. Something undeniable. So he contacted Dr. Carter again. She hesitated to meet, but finally agreed, under one condition: no palace involvement. Not this time. They met at a discreet cafe outside London. Dr. Carter looked older now, wearier, her eyes filled with something between guilt and fear. I was the one she trusted, she admitted quietly. She came to me when no one else would listen. She was terrified but determined. She wanted to know the truth before it was too late. Did you tell her? William asked. I told her what the data said, Carter replied. I warned her it could destroy her. But she said destruction was better than deception. He nodded slowly. And the results? She hesitated, glancing around. They showed what you already know. Your mother wasn't mistaken. But she never wanted you to suffer because of it. Her plan was to tell you when you were older, after things had settled. Did anyone else know? Dr. Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. I sent the report directly to her. A week later, I was visited by government officials asking for all copies. I refused. 2 days later, her accident happened. After that, my office was raided. I left the country for a while. You think that was coincidence? William's stomach twisted. He realized then that his mother hadn't been paranoid. She'd been hunted. And yet, in all her fear, she still tried to protect him. That thought broke him. He could picture her. Tired, cornered, clutching a letter from a scientist confirming her worst fears, and still smiling for cameras, still waving to the crowds. Because she couldn't tell anyone. Because the truth would destroy her sons before it ever saved them. He whispered, she died with it. Dr. Carter nodded. But not before making sure someone else would find it. He frowned. What do you mean? She reached in her bag and pulled out a small metal USB drive. She left this with me. I was told to give it to you only if I ever learned the palace tried to suppress the truth again. That day has come. He took it, his hands shaking. Be careful, she said. The truth isn't safe, especially when it threatens power. When he got home, he plugged in the drive. A single file appeared. For William, from Mom. He clicked. The video was grainy, the lighting dim. Diana sat at a small desk, her face calm, but her eyes heavy. If you're seeing this, she began, it means everything I feared has come to pass. You're old enough now to understand that sometimes love and truth don't live in the same house. They fight each other. And I fought my whole life for you to know who you are. She paused, tears glistening. I can't name names. I can't say everything. But I can tell you this. Follow the paper trail. The truth isn't buried. It's locked. And if you find it, you'll free more than just yourself. You'll free all of us. The screen faded to black. William sat motionless. For a long time, he didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't think. Just stared at the frozen image of his mother's face. She'd left him a message beyond death, a roadmap to truth, written in courage and grief. He knew then that this wasn't about vengeance. It was about finishing what she started. But as he reached for his phone to call his aide, an alert flashed across the screen. Breaking news. Palace whistleblower found dead in apparent suicide. Jonathan Reeves. The man who started it all. The man who sent the leak. And next to the headline, a line that made his blood run cold. Authorities report missing files recovered near the scene. The same files he now held. Was he next? The night felt endless. Rain streaked down the windows of Kensington Palace, each drop tapping like a clock, counting down to something inevitable. William sat alone in his study, his mother's video still replaying in his mind. Her voice, soft, steady, haunted, echoed through him. Follow the paper trail. The truth isn't buried. It's locked. But where did it lead?